Chapter 13. The Pensieve. The door of the office opened. "Hello, Potter," said Moody. "Come in, then." Harry walked inside. He had been inside Dumbledore's office once before. It was a very beautiful circular room lined with pictures of previous headmisters and headmistresses of Hogwarts, all of whom were fast asleep, their chests rising and falling gently. Cornelius Fudge was standing beside Dumbledore's desk, wearing his usual pinstripe cloak and holding his lime green bowler hat. "Harry," said Fudge jollily, moving forwards, "how are you?" "Fine," Harry lied. "We were just talking about the night when Mr. Koch turned up in the grounds," said Fudge. "It was you who found him, was it not?" "Yes," said Harry. Then, feeling it was pointless to pretend that he hadn't overheard what they had been saying, he added, "I didn't see Madame Maxime anywhere, and she'd have a job hiding, wouldn't she?" Dumbledore smiled at Harry behind Fudge's back, his eyes twinkling. "Yes, well," said Fudge, looking embarrassed, "we're about to go for a short walk in the grounds, Harry. If you'll excuse us, perhaps if you just go back to your class." "I wanted to talk to you, Professor," Harry said quickly, looking at Dumbledore, who gave him a swift, searching look. "Wait here for me, Harry," he said. "Our examination of the grounds will not take long." They trooped out in silence past him and closed the door. After a minute or so, Harry heard the clanks of Moody's wooden leg growing fainter in the corridor below. He looked around. "Hello, Fawkes," he said. Fawkes, Professor Dumbledore's phonics, was standing on his golden perch beside the door, the size of a swan, with magnificent scarlet and gold plumage. He switched his long tail and blinked benignly at Harry. Harry sat down in a chair in front of Dumbledore's desk. For several minutes he sat and watched the old headmaster and mistresses snoozing in their frames, singing about what he had just heard, and running his fingers over his scar. It had stopped hurting now. He felt much calmer somehow now he was in Dumbledore's office, knowing he would shortly be telling him about the dream. Harry looked up at the walls behind the desk. The patched and rage sorting hat was standing on a shelf. A glass case next to it held a magnificent silver sword, with large rubies set into the hilt, which Harry recognized as the one he himself had pulled out of the sorting hat in his second year. The sword had once belonged to Godric Gryffindor, founder of Harry's house. He was gazing at it, remembering how it had come to his aid when he had thought all hope was lost, when he noticed a path of silvery light dancing and shimmering on the glass case. He looked around for a source of the light and saw a sliver of silver light shining brightly from within a black cabinet behind him, whose door had not been closed properly. Harry hesitated, glanced at Fawkes, then got up, walked across the office, and pulled the cabinet door open. A shallow stone basin lay there, with odd carvings around the edge, runes and symbols that Harry did not recognize. The silvery light was coming from the basin's contents, which were like nothing Harry had ever seen before. He could not tell whether the substance was liquid or gas. It was a bright, whitish silver, and it was moving ceaselessly. The surface of it became ruffled like water beneath wind, and then like clouds separated and swirled smoothly. It looked like light made liquid or like wind made solid. Harry couldn't make up his mind. He wanted to touch it to find out what it felt like, but knowingly for years' experience of the magical world told him that sticking his hand into a bowl full of some unknown substance was a very stupid thing to do. He therefore pulled his hand out of the inside of his robes, cast a nervous look around the office, looked back at the contents of the basin, and prodded them. The surface of the silvery stuff inside the basin began to swirl very fast. Harry bent closer, his hand right inside the cabinet. The silvery substance had become transparent. It looked like glass. He looked down into it, expecting to see the stone bottom of the basin, and saw instead an enormous room below the surface of the mysterious substance, a room into which he seemed to be looking through a circular window in the ceiling. The room was dimly lit. He thought it might even be underground, for there were no windows, merely torches in brackets such as the one that illuminated the walls of Hogwarts. Lowering his face so that his nose was a mere inch away from the glassy substance, Harry saw that rows and rows of witches and wizards were set around every wall on what seemed to be benches risen in levels.
An empty chair stood in the very center of the room. There was something about the chair that gave Harry an ominous feeling. Chair encircled the arms of it, as though its occupants were usually tied to it. Where was this place? It surely wasn't Hogwarts. He had never seen a room like that here in the castle. More was the crowd in the mysterious room, and the bottom of the basin wasn't composed of adults, and Harry knew they were not normally that many teachers at Hogwarts. They seemed, he thought, to be waiting for something, even though he could only see the tops of the pointed heads. They all seemed to be feeling in one direction, and nobody was talking to anybody else. The basin being circle, and the room he was observing square. Harry could not make out what was going on in the corner of it. He leaned even closer, tilting his head, trying to see. The tip of his nose touched the straight substance into which he was staring. Dumbledore's office gave an almighty large Harry was thrown forwards and pitched headwards into the substance inside the basin. But his head did not. His very stone bottom. He was falling. Something icy cold and black. It was like being sucked into a dark whirlpool. And suddenly he found himself sitting on a bench at the end of the room. Inside the basin, a bench raised above the other. He looked up at the high stone ceiling, expanding to see the circle window through which he had just been stabbed, but there was nothing but dark solid. Breathing hard and fast, Harry looked him. Not one of the witches and wizard room, and there were at least 200, was looking at him. Not one of them seemed noticed that a 14-year-old boy drops from the ceiling into the midst. He turned to the wizard next to him on the bench and uttered a loud cry of surprise that reverberated around the silent room. He was sitting right next to Albus Dumbledore. Professor Harry said in a kind of strange whisper, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I was just looking at that basin in your cabinet. Where are we? But Dumbledore didn't move or speak. He ignored Harry completely. Like every other wizard on a beaches, he was staring into the far corner of the room. Where there was a door, Harry gazed, nonplussed, and Dumbledore then around at them. The Pensieve. Silently watches crowd then back on Dumbledore, and then in door on him. Once before, Harry had found himself in a place where nobody could see or hear him. The time he had fallen through a page in an enchanted diary right into somebody else's memory, and until he was very much mistaken, something of the sort had happened again. Harry raised his right hand, hesitated, and then waved in the energetically in front of Dumbledore's face. Dumbledore did not blink look around at Harry, or indeed move at all, and that in Harry's opinion solved the matter. Dumbledore wouldn't ignore him like that. He was inside a memory, and this was not the present day Dumbledore. And it couldn't be that long ago that Dumbledore sitting next to him now was silver, hard just like the present day Dumbledore. But what was the place? What were all these wizards waiting for? Harry looked around more carefully. The room, as he had suspected, when observing it from above, was almost certainly underground, more of a danger than a room, he thought. There was a building and forbidding air about the place. There were no pictures on the walls, no decorations at all, just the serried rows of benches rising in levels all around the room, positioned so that they had a clearer view of the chair with the chains on its arms. Before Harry could reach any conclusion about the place in which they were, he heard footsteps. The door in the corner of the dungeon opened. And the three people entered, or at least one man flanked by two Dementors. Harry's inside when clothed. The Dementors, tall hooded creatures whose faces were concealed, were glided slowly towards the chair in the center of the room, each grasping one of the Mav's arms with their deep and rotten looking hands. The man between them looked as though he was about to faint, and Harry couldn't blame him. He knew the Dementors could not touch him inside a memory, but Harry remembered the power only too well. The watching crowd recoiled slightly as the Dementors placed the man in the chair and glided back out of the room. The door swung shut behind them. Harry looked down at the man now sitting in the chair and saw that it was Kirkwall. Unlike Dumbledore, Kirkwall looked much younger. His hair and goatee were black. He was not dressed in sleek furs, but in thin and ragged robes. He was shaking. Even Harry watched. The chain on the arms of the chair glowed suddenly gold and snaked surveyed up his arm, begging him there. Igor Kirkwall said a curt was to Harry lift. Harry looked around and saw Mr. Crouched standing up in the middle of the bench beside him. Crouched hair was dark, his face was much less lined, he looked thin and alert. Ralph's hair was dark, his face was much less lined, he looked fit and alert. You have been brought from Azkaban to give evidence to the Minister of Magic. You have given us to understand that you have important information for us. Karkaroff stated himself as the best he could lightly bound to the chair. Topsy B said, and although your voice was very serious, Harry could still hear the familiar unctuous note in it. I wish to be of use to the ministry. I wish to be helped. I know that ministry is trying to round up the last of the Dark Lordly supporters. I am eager to assist in any way I can. There was a murmur around the beaches. Some of the words and witches were surveying Karkaroff with interest, others with pronounced mistrust.
There Harry had quite dismissed from Dumbledore as the day a familiar growling voice in fields. Harry leaned forward so that he could see past Dumbledore's mid-air moody was sitting there song. There was a very noticeable difference in his appearance. He did not have his magical air, but to normal ones. Both were looking down upon Karkaroff, and both were narrowed in interest. Crouch in going to let him out, Moody breathed quietly to Dumbledore. He's done a deal with him. Took me 6 months to track him down, and Crouch is going to let him go if he has got annoyed new names. Let's have this information, I say, and arrow him straight back to the Dumbledores. Dumbledore made a small noise of dessert through his long crooked nose. I was focusing. You don't like the Dumbledores, do you, Albus? Said Moody with a certain smile. No, said Dumbledore's calm. I'm afraid I don't. I have long felt the ministry is wrong to ally itself with such creatures. But for feels like this, Moody said softly. You say you have names for us. Karkaroff spied Mr. Crouch. Let us hear us, sir, please. You must understand, said Karkaroff hurriedly, that he who must not be named operated always in the greatest secrecy. He preferred that we, I may to say, his supporters, and I regret you know very deeply that I ever counted myself among them. Get on with it, sneered Moody. Well, now knew the names of very own of our fellows here alone. I know exactly who we all were. Which was a wise movie, wasn't it, as it reunited someone like you, Karkaroff, training all of them in muttered Moody. Yet you say you have some names for us, said Mr. Crouch. I do, said Karkaroff breathlessly. And there were impotent supporters like you, people I saw with my own eyes done his bidding. I give this information as a signal that I fully and totally renounce him, and I am filled with remorse to so sleep I can bewail. The name said Mr. Crouch sharply. Karkaroff drew a deep breath. There was Antonin Dolohov, he said. I saw him tatter control smugglers and non-superstar of the Dark Lord, and helped him to it. murmured Moody. "We have already apprehended Tolho," said Crouch. "He was caught shortly after yourself." "Inside," said Karkaroff, his ears twitching. I am delighted to hear it, but he didn't look it." Harry could tell that this news had come as a real blow to him. One of his names was worthless. "Any others?" said Crouch coldly. "Oh yes, there was Rosie," said Karkaroff, hurriedly, "even Rosie." "Rosie is dead," said Crouch. "He was caught shortly after you were too. He preferred to fight rather than coming quickly, and was killed in the struggle. Took a bit of my with him, so." With around Moody is Harry Roach. Harry looked around at him one more and saw him indication the large chunk out of his nose to Dumbledore's. No more than Rosie deserted," said Karkaroff. A real note of panic in his voice. "No." Harry could see that he was starting to worry that none of his information would be any other to the Ministry. Karkaroff's eyes darted towards the door into the corner behind which the Dementors and the Devil still stood vision. "Any more?" said Crouch. "Yes," said Karkaroff. "There was Travers B. Halpert, narrated the Mechanics massacre has specialized in the Imperation's cause, forced countless people to do horrible things. Rook, who was a spy and Picet, he who must not be denied useful information from inside the Ministry itself." Harry could tell that this time Karkaroff had struck cold. The watching crowd were all murmuring together. "Rookfoot," said Mr. Crouch, nodding to a witch sitting in front of him, who begins the recognition of her piece of parchment, August Rookwood of the Department of Mysteries. "The very same," said Karkaroff eagerly. "I believe he used a network of well-placed wizards, both inside the Ministry and out, to collect information. Von Travers and Multisaber we have," said Mr. Crouch. "Very well, Karkaroff. If that is all you will be written to Azkaban, will you be diced?" "Not yet," cried Karkaroff, looking quite desperate. "Wait, I have more." Harry could see him was swishing in the terrible blood. His white skin courteously strangled with the black of his hair and beard. "Snape!" he shouted. "Severus Snape! Snape has been cleared with his counsel," said Quench's cold. "He has been watched for by Albus Dumbledore." "No!" shouted Karkaroff, straining at the which handed him to the chair. "I assure you, Severus Snape is a Death-Eater." Dumbledore got to his stick. "I have given evidence already on this matter," he said calmly. "Severus Snape always needed a Death-Eater. However, he rejoined our side before Lord Voldemort, downful and turned spy for us at great personal risk. He is now no more a Death-Eater than I am." Harry turned to like a mad-air Moody. He was wearing a look of deep suspicion behind Dumbledore's back. "Very well, Karkaroff," Crouch said coldly. "You have been of assistance. I shall review your case. You will return to Azkaban in the meantime." Mr. Crouch's voices faded. Harry looked around. The Duncan door was deafening as though it was a mile of smoke. Everything was within he could see only his own body, and also was swirling darkness. And then the dungeon returned. Harry was sitting in a different seat, still on the high-cast hinge, but now to the left side of Mr. Crouch. The atmosphere seemed quite different, relaxed, even cheerful. The witcher and wizards all around the walls were talking to each other, almost thought they were at some sort of sporting event, which halfway up the rows of hunches opposite Couch Harry A. She had short blonde hair, was wearing magenta robes, and was sucking the out of a side green while. It was in Master table a young Rita Scatter. Harry looked around. Dumbledore was sitting beside him again, wearing different robes. Mr. Crouch looked tired in somehow farces Scatter. Harry understood it. It was a different memory, a different day, a different real. The door in the corner opened and Ludo Bagman walked in the room. This was not, however, a Ludo Bagman gone to the seat, but a Ludo Bagman who was early at the height of the questionable planning finesse.
His nose wasn't broken now. He was tall and lean and muscly. Bagman looked nervous as he sat down in the chain chair, but it did not bind him there as it had bound Karkaroff. And Bagman, perhaps taking heart from this, glanced around at the watching crowd, waved at a couple of them, and managed a small smile. Ludo Bagman, you have been brought here in front of the Council of Magical Law to answer charges relating to the activities of the Death Eaters, said Mr. Crouch. We have heard the evidence against you and are about to reach your verdict. Do you have anything to add to your testimony before we pronounce judgment? Harry couldn't believe his ears. Ludo Bagman, a Death Eater? Only, said Bagman, smiling awkwardly, well, I know I've been a bit of an idiot. One or two wizards and witches in the surrounding seats smiled indulgently. Mr. Crouch did not appear to share their feelings. He was staring down at Ludo Bagman with an expression of the utmost severity and dislike. You never spoke a truer word, boy, someone muttered dryly to Dumbledore behind Harry. He looked around and saw Moody sitting there again. If I didn't know he'd always be dim, I'd have said some of those bludgers had permanently affected his brain. Ludovic Bagman, you were caught passing information to Lord Voldemort's supporters, said Mr. Crouch. For this I suggest a term of imprisonment in Azkaban lasting no less than... But there was an angry ouchie from the surrounding benches. Several of the witches and wizards around the wall stood up, shaking their hands and even their fists at Mr. Crouch. But I have told you I have no idea, Bagman called earnestly over the crowd's babble, his round blue eyes widening. None at all. Old Bookwood was a friend of my dad's. Never crossed my mind he was in with you-know-who. I thought I was collecting information for our side, and Rookwood kept talking about getting me a job in the ministry later on. Once my Quidditch days are over, you know... I mean, I can't keep getting hit by bludgers for the rest of my life, can I? There were titters from the crowd. It will be put to the vote, said Mr. Crouch coldly. He turned to the right-hand side of the dungeon. The jury will please raise their hands, those in favor of imprisonment. Harry looked towards the right-hand side of the dungeon. Not one person raised their hand. The walls began to clap. One of the witches on the jury stood up. Yes, barked Crouch. We'd just like to congratulate Mr. Bagman on his splendid performance for England in the Quidditch match against Turkey last Saturday, the witch said breathlessly. Mr. Crouch looked furious. The dungeon was ringing with applause now. Bagman got to his feet and bowed, beaming. Despicable, Mr. Crouch spat at Dumbledore, sitting down as Bagman walked out of the dungeon. Rook would get him a job indeed. The day Ludo Bagman joins us will be a very sad day for the ministry. And the dungeon dissolved again. When it had returned, Harry looked around. He and Dumbledore were still sitting beside Mr. Crouch, but the atmosphere could not have been more different. There was total silence, broken only by the dry sobs of a frail, wispy-looking witch in the seat next to Mr. Crouch. She was clutching a handkerchief to her mouth with trembling hands. Harry looked up at Crouch and saw that he looked gaunter and grayer than ever before. A nerve was twitching in his temple. "Bring them in," he said, and his voice echoed through the silent dungeon. The door in the corner opened yet again. 6 Dementors entered this time, flanking a group of 4 people. Harry saw the people in the crowd turn to look up at Mr. Crouch. A few of them whispered to each other. The Dementors placed each of the 4 people in the 4 chairs with chained arms, which now stood on the dungeon floor. There was a 6th man who started blankly up at Crouch, a thinner and more nervous-looking man whose eyes were darting around the crowd, a woman with thick, shining dark hair and heavily hooded eyes who was sitting in the chain chair as though it was a throne, and a boy in his late teens who looked nothing short of petrified. He was shivering, his straw-colored hair all over his face, his freckled skin milk white. The wispy little witch beside Crouch began to rock backwards and forwards in her seat, whimpering into her handkerchief. Crouch stood up. He looked down upon the 4 in front of him, and there was pure-hearted in his face. "You have been brought here before the Council of the Magical Law," he said clearly, "so that we may pass judgment on you for a crime so heinous." "Father," said the boy with the straw-colored hair, "Father, please." "That we have rarely heard the like of it within this court," said Crouch, speaking more loudly, drowning out his son's voice. "We have heard the evidence against you. The 4 of you stand accused of capturing an Aurora, Frank Longbottom, and subjecting him to the cruciatus curse, believing him to have knowledge of the present whereabouts of your exiled master, he who must not be named." "Father, I didn't," shrieked the boy in chains below. "I didn't, I swear it. Father, don't send me back to the Dementors." "You are further accused," bellowed Mr. Crouch, "of using the cruciatus curse on Frank Longbottom's wife, when he would not give you information. You planned to restore he who must not be named to power and to resume the lives of violence you presumably led while he was strong. I now ask the jury." "Mother!" screamed the boy below, and the wispy little witch beside Crouch began to sob, rocking backwards and forwards. "Mother, stop him! Mother, I didn't do it! It wasn't me!" "I now ask the jury," shouted Mr. Crouch, "to raise their hands if they believe, as I do, that these crimes deserve a life sentence in Azkaban." In unison, the witches and wizards along the right-hand side of the dungeon raised their hands. The crowd around the walls began to clap as it had for Bagman, their faces full of savage triumph. The boy began to scream, "No, Mother, no! I didn't do it! I didn't do it! I didn't know! Don't send me there! Don't let him!" The Dementors were gliding back into the room. The boy's 3 companions rose quietly from their seats. The woman with the heavy-lidded eyes looked up at Crouch and called, "The Dark Lord will rise again, Crouch. Throw us into Azkaban. We will wait. He will rise again and will come for us. He will reward us beyond any of his other supporters. We alone were faithful. We alone tried to find him." But the boy was trying to fight the Dementors off, even though Harry could see their cold, draining power starting to affect him.
The crowd were cheering, some of them on their feet, as the woman swept out of the dungeon, and the boy continued to struggle. "I am your son!" he screamed up at Crouch. "I am your son!" "You are no son of mine!" bellowed Mr. Crouch, his eyes bulging suddenly. "I have no son!" The wispy witch beside him gave a great gasp and slumped in her seat. She had fainted. Crouch appeared not to have noticed. "Take them away!" Crouch shouted at the Dementors, spit flying from his mouth. "Take them away, and may they rot there!" "Father, father! I wasn't involved! No! Father, please!" "I think, Harry, it is time to return to my office," said a quiet voice in Harry's ear. Harry started. He looked around. Then he looked on his other side. There was an Albus Dumbledore sitting on his right, watching Crouch's son being dragged away by the Dementors, and there was an Albus Dumbledore on his left, looking right at him. "Come," said the Dumbledore on his left, and he put his hand under Harry's elbow. Harry felt himself rising into the air. The dungeon dissolved around him. For a moment all was blackness, and then he felt as though he had done a slow-motion somersault, suddenly landing from off his feet in that seemed like the dazzling light of Dumbledore's sunlight office. The stone basin was shimmering in the cabinet in front of him, and Albus Dumbledore was standing beside him. "Professor," Harry gasped, "I know I shouldn't. I didn't mean the cabinet door was sort of open and—" "I quite understand," said Dumbledore. He lifted the basin, carried it over to his desk, placed it upon the polished top, and sat down in the chair behind it. He motioned Harry to sit down opposite him. Harry did so, starting at the stone basin. The contents had returned to their original silvery white state, swirling and rippling beneath his gaze. "What is it?" Harry asked sharply. "This? It is called a Pensieve," said Dumbledore. "I sometimes find, and I'm sure you know the feeling, that I simply have too many thoughts and memories crammed into my mind." Said Harry, who couldn't truthfully say that he had ever felt anything of the sort. "At these times," said Dumbledore, indicating the stone basin, "I use the Pensieve. One simply siphons the excess thought from one's mind, pours them into the basin, and examines them at one's leisure. It becomes easier to spot patterns and links, you understand, when they are in this form." "You mean that stuffs your thoughts?" Harry said, staring at the swirling white substance in the basin. "Certainly," said Dumbledore. "Let me show you." Dumbledore drew his wand out of the inside of his robes and placed the tip into his own silvery hair near his temple. When he took the wand away, hair seemed to be clinging to it, but then Harry saw that it was in fact a glistering strand of the same strange silvery white substance that filled the Pensieve. Dumbledore added this fresh salt to the basin, and Harry astonished. saw his own face swimming around the surface of the bowl. Dumbledore placed his long hands on either side of the Pensieve and swirled it rather as a gold prospector would swirl for fragments of gold. And Harry saw his own face change smoothly into Snape's, who opened his mouth and spoke to the ceiling, his voice echoing slightly. "It's coming back, Karkaroff's too, stronger and clearer than ever. A connection I could have made without assistance," Dumbledore signaled, "but never mind." He peered over the top of his half-moon spectacles at Harry, who was gaping at Snape's face, which was continuing to swirl around the bowl. "I was using the Pensieve when Mr. Fudge arrived for our meeting, and put it away rather hastily. Undoubtedly, I did not fasten the cabinet door properly. Naturally, it would have attracted your attention." "I'm sorry," Harry mumbled. Dumbledore shook his head. "Curiosity is not a sin," he said, "but we should exercise caution with our curiosity." "Yes, indeed." Frowning slightly, he prodded the salts within the basin with the tip of his wand. Instantly, a figure rose out of it, a plump, scowling girl of around 16, who began to revolve slowly, with her feet still in the basin. She took no notice whatsoever of Harry or Professor Dumbledore. When she spoke, her voice echoed as Snape's head down, as though it was coming from the depths of the stone basin. "Professor Dumbledore, and I was only teasing him, sir. I only said I'd seen him kissing Florence behind the greenhouses last Thursday." "But why, Bertha?" said Dumbledore sadly, looking up at the now silently revolving girl. "Why did you have to fall on him in the first place?" "Bertha?" Harry whispered, looking up at her. "Is that was the Bertha Jorkins?" "Yes," said Dumbledore, prodding the salts in the basin again. Bertha sank back into them, and they became silvery and opaque once more. "That was Bertha as I remember her at school." The silvery light from the Pensieve illuminated Dumbledore's face, and it struck Harry suddenly how very old he was looking. He knew, of course, that Dumbledore was getting on in years, but somehow he never really thought of Dumbledore as an old man. "So, Harry," said Dumbledore quietly, "before you got lost in my thoughts, you wanted to tell me something." "Yes," said Harry. "Professor, I was in divination just now, and I fell asleep." He hesitated here, wondering if a reprimand was coming, but Dumbledore merely said, "Quite understandable. Continue." "Well, I had a dream," said Harry. "A dream about Lord Voldemort. He was torturing Wormtail. You know who Wormtail?" "I don't know," said Dumbledore promptly. "Please continue." Voldemort got a letter from a novel. He said something like Wormtail's plunder had been repaired. He said someone was dead. Then he said Wormtail wouldn't be fit to the snake. There was a snake beside his chair. He said he'd be feeding me to eat instead. Then he did the Cruciatus curse on Wormtail, and my scar hurt, Harvey said. It woke me up. It hurt so badly. Dumbledore merely looked at him. That's all, said Harvey. I see, said Dumbledore quietly. I see. How has your scar hurt at any other time this year, except in the time it woke you up over the summer?
No. How did you know it woke up me over the summer? He said, astonished. You are not serious, only correspondent, said Dumbledore. I have also been in contact with him ever since he left Hogwarts last year. It was I who suggested the mountainside cave as the safest place for him to stay. Dumbledore got up and began walking up and down behind his desk. Every now and then he placed his one trip to this temple, removed another shining silver true, and added it to Pensieve. The shrew inside began to swirl so fast that Harry couldn't make out anything clearly. It was merely a blur of color. Professor, he said quietly. After a couple of minutes, Dumbledore stopped pacing and looked at the Harry. I apologize, he said quietly. He sat back down at his desk. Did you know why my scar hurting me? Dumbledore looked very intently at Harry for a moment and then said, I have to worry, no more than that. It is my belief that your scar hurt both when Lord Voldemort is near you and when he is feeling a particularly strong surge of hearted. But why? Because you and he are connected by the curse that failed, said Dumbledore. That is no ordinary scar. So you think the dream, did it really happen? It is possible, said Dumbledore. I would say probably. Harry, did you see Voldemort? No, said Harry, just the back of his chair, but there wouldn't have been anything to see, would there? I mean, he hasn't got a body, has he? But then how could he have held the wand? Harry said slowly. How indeed, muttered Dumbledore. How indeed? Neither Dumbledore nor Harry spoke for a while. Dumbledore was gazing across the room every now and then, placing his one trip to this temple and adding another shining silver through the thin mass within the Pensieve. Professor, Harry said at the last, do you think he's getting stronger? Voldemort? Said Dumbledore, looking at Harry over the Pensieve. It was a characteristic piercing look Dumbledore had given him on other occasions, and always made Harry feel as though Dumbledore was seeing right through him, in a way that even Moody's magical eye could not. Once again, Harry, I can only give you my subscriptions. Dumbledore sighed again, and he looked older and warier than ever. The years of Voldemort are sent to power, he said, were marked with disappearance. Bertha Jorkins has vanished without trace in the place where Voldemort was certainly known to be less. Mrs. Crouch, too, has disappeared. Within these very grounds, and there was a third disappearance, one which the ministry, I regret to say, does not consider of my importance, for it concerned a muggle. His name was Frank Bryce. He lived in the village where Voldemort's father grew up, and he has not been seen since last August. You see, I read the Muggle newspaper, unlike most of my minister friends. Dumbledore looked very seriously at Harry. This disappearance seemed to me to be linked. The ministry disagree, as you may have heard while waiting outside my office. Harry nodded. Silence fell between them again, Dumbledore extracting through every now and then. Harry felt as though he ought to go, but his curiosity held him in his chair. Professor, he said again. Yes, Harry, said Dumbledore. Could I ask you about the code things I was in? Is the Pensieve? You could, said Dumbledore heavily. I attended it many times, but some trail come back to me more clearly than other. Particularly now. You know the trail you found me in? The one with crows on? Well, was he talking about Neville's parents? Dumbledore gave Harry a very sharp look. Has Neville never told you why he has been brought up by his grandmother? He said. Harry shook his head, wondering as he did so how he could have failed to ask Neville this in almost 4 years of knowing him. Yes, they were talking about Neville's parents, said Dumbledore. His father Frank was an arrow just like Professor Moody. He and his wife were tortured for information about Voldemort's whereabouts after he lost his powers, as you heard. So they dead? Said Harry quietly. No, said Dumbledore. His voice full of bitterness Harry had never heard then before. They are insane. They are both in Stu Mungo's hospital for magical maladies and injuries. I believe Neville visits them with his grandmother during the holiday. They do not recognize him. Harry sat there, horror-struck. He had never never in 4 years, bothered to find out. The Longbottoms were very popular, said Dumbledore. The attacks of them came after Voldemort fell from power, just when everyone thought they were safe. Those attacks caused a wave of fire such as I have never known. The ministry was under great pressure to catch those who had done it. Unfortunately, the Longbottoms' evidence was given their condition known to Rowling. Then Mr. Crouch's son might not have been involved, said Harry slowly. Dumbledore shook his head. As to that, I have no idea. Harry sat in silence one more, watching the content of the Pensieve swirl. There were 2 more questions he was burning to ask, but they concerned the quiet of living people. He said, Mr. Beckman has never been a student of any dark activity science, said Dumbledore calmly. Right, said Harry hastily, staring at the content of the Pensieve again, which were swirling more slowly now that Dumbledore had stopped adding through but the Pensieve seemed to be asking his question for him. Shep's face was swimming on the surface again. Dumbledore glanced down into it, and then up Harry. No more has Professor Shape, he said. Harry looked into Dumbledore's light blue eyes, and the thing he really wanted to know spilled out of his mouth before he could stop it. What made you think he'd really stop supporting Voldemort, Professor? Dumbledore held Harry's gaze for a few seconds and then said, that Harry is a matter between Professor Snape and myself. Harry knew that his interview was over. Dumbledore did not look angry, yet there was a finally in this tone that told Harry it was time to go. He stopped up, and so did Dumbledore. Harry, he said, as Harry reached the door, please do not speak about Neville's parents to anybody else. He has the right to let people know when he is ready. Yes, Professor, said Harry, turning to go. And Harry looked back. Dumbledore was standing over the Pensieve, his face lit from beneath by its silvery spot of light, looking older than ever. He stared at Harry for a moment and then said, Good luck with the third test.